My name is Martin Madert with the Witness to War Foundation. It's November 2nd, 2019, and we are in Seattle, Washington for the United States Marine Corps Vietnam Tankers Association reunion. Sitting with Mr. David Turner, Turner, who served in Vietnam in the United States Marine Corps. If you could tell me what years you were in the Marine Corps proper.
I entered the Marine Corps in 1968. I did my first year in Camp Hamilton with the M60s, 5th Division, heavy tanks, and then I got sent to Vietnam. On arrival to Vietnam, I entered the Alpha Company, 3rd Tank Division, Dong Ha.
And when was that approximately?
That was February of '69, and that's when I started my tour, and I was supposed to do the 13 months.
And what rank were you when you got there?
I was a PFC, but then I got my promotion to Lance Corporal, and I was first started on Alpha 2-3, the tank was, and that was TC'd by a TC by the name of Creature. We never knew anybody's first name at that time. I'm sorry. And he's the one that got me conditioned to country. So I was his driver, gunner, whatever he put me in the slot was my job, and that's what I learned to be in country. About 3 months in, I was transferred to Frank Renfrewitz's Trees tank, which was Alpha 2-4, the sister tank, and that's when my life story started.
And you're still a gunner on these tanks?
Well, we did everything. The Marine Corps always did the training so that if Tree got killed, we could take his slot, take the loader slot, the gunner, whatever. We could get that tank back to where we needed to take it. We had got the order to go on Idaho Canyon. That was the operation. And
where is Idaho Canyon?
pardon?
Where was it?
The Idaho Canyon was an operation because we had information that the VC were going to come through the Ho Chi Minh Trail in between Laos and Cambodia and Con Tien and the DMZ, and they were going to make a push south for the 69 Tet. Captain Wanch, who died in the battle, got the orders, so we mounted up and we went out with our platoon and went looking for him, and 3 days later we found him. That happened on July 28th, 1969. We got caught on the ridge. I was outside the tank. When the RPG hit me, I was laying next to the loader's hatch, next to the turret, facing forward, and the RPG came in, raised my legs, and blew me up, and I did a somersault and landed on my feet on the armor plating. And the first pop-up flare went off in the night. Well, Tree, Brown, and Grady are already in the tank getting ready for the battle. I then climbed from the cargo net to the TC's compartment to drop in there, and when I dropped in there, that's when the mortar came in, blew up, and I had a fin here that blew my face open. So when I hit the inside of the tank, Frank could only look and say, "My God, I got to keep you busy because you don't know how bad you're hurt." Well, I was the only critical one wounded in the tank at that time. So for 4.5 hours, while they depleted all the ammo and took care of business, I'm sitting in this TC's hatch trying to get a 50 to work, which when they put it in the cupola, they flipped it downward so you could only fire like 3 rounds, and you had a primer stick out of your 90. You had to reach up to clear it to get it to fire. So finally, we have done everything we can, and Tree says, "We got to get out of here." So him and Grady get me out of the tank, and Tree is taking me to triage, which is up behind us. It's a bomb crater like. And he didn't remember this, but on the way up, I get hit by a sniper in my knee. hits my thigh, and comes back out. And he doesn't remember that he told me, David, well, animal, I'm sorry you're getting hit. And he kept going to get me in the pit. So when I'm in the triage pit, he went back to doing what a Marine does. He went to look for other wounded or whatever. But as I'm in there, something happens. I don't know, it was a vision or whatever. But at that time, they're bringing the dead in, and I'm sitting on the edge, or laying on the edge of the hill, and I hear this horse. And I'm going, what is a horse doing here? And all of a sudden, all the noises of the war are gone. And as I look, I see the horse come into the pit. This is what I finally told Frank and John, because that's why I'm here. To tell them what happened to Captain Watts or whatever. So as I'm laying there, this horse comes in. The rider is the most beautiful man I ever seen in my life. His hair is liquid gold. He has a purple vestment on that I think was a shrine of Christ. And the horse is pure black, and he wants to go. He wants to keep going to whatever he's doing. Well, he's right here. I'm eye level with him. And I watch as he takes his hand and he's picking up these balls of sparks. And as he picks up the one that they had laid at my feet, he then looks at me and he sees me. He sees me and he acknowledges, and I acknowledge I see him. And he brings his hand up and he puts the ball into his vestment. And at that time he turns and he looks. And now I'm eye to eye with him. And his eyes were the most beautiful blue you could ever imagine. But his pupils were hourglasses. And you could see the gold running through them. And as he looked at me, I thought, okay, I'm next. This is death. This is the angel that comes to get you or whatever. And as he does that, he looks at me and he nods like this. And I knew I wasn't going to die. And he goes out the other side. Now all of the sounds come back, the cries, the battle, you can hear the rounds. Pup was just making his round on the outside of our perimeter, and I'm watching the red rain come down. And he leaves, and I'm medevacked out. Well, when I got to Da Nang, they took me from there to the hospital ship repos. While I was on the repos being cleaned up and fixed, ready for transport to Guam, I asked about Alpha 24 or all the tanks on the ridge, at Mudder's Ridge. And I was told we were overrun and Tree, Brown, and Grady were killed. When Frank contacted Da Nang to see how I was, he was told I was DOA on arrival, dead on arrival. So for 50 years, we both thought we were dead. This I had tattooed on me on my last PTSD issue where I really went nuts. I took on 12 cops. I was giving up. I was telling my life or feeling the guilt from Vietnam and all that because I thought I lived and my crew died. So I drew it myself. And I told my wife, I said, this is what happened that night on that ridge. Can I show it?
Yeah.
Whoops. This is my wife's cousin. He was a Korean vet. He's dead. But this is the horse, the man, my crew, and you watch his hand, he's picking up that fireball. Ever since I had this put on me, I have never had another PTSD issue. I don't drink. I have no animosity toward the Vietnamese. I have no animosity for what I did. But because of Swanson Box and because of the Vietnam Veterans Tankers Association, I told John and Jan Wendling Turtle. Because when I got my first Swanson Box, I seen Tree, just the name. And I contacted John Weir and I said, can you get a hold of this man and have him contact me? When Tree contacted me, we were both brought to our knees because he thought I was dead. And I said, Tree, I thought the crew was gone. And then I got a hold of Grady, and I did find out Tree told me, no, we all made it home, David. But he said, I thought you were dead. And he said, the only one that died right now is Brown. He died of Agent Orange, we think. But he's the only one, but he made it home to Chicago. So for 50 years, we thought this. But because of this association, I'm now going to write a book about this angel. My grandson wants to ride my full dresser to the wall. And with Frank's help, the association's help, and a publisher or whatever, it's going to be like the old Reader's Digest where you see those little articles about personal items. But I want to write it, and I'm going to have it published so that my grandson can take a copy to the wall with a note on top of it that states, and I'm doing this to prove to all who've fallen in all the wars, to their loved ones, that when their loved one fell on our battlefields, they weren't taken with hostility. They weren't taken with this so-called Grim Reaper, the skeleton, the sickle, and the black horse. God sent the most beautiful being to take us home. And that's going to be my story. And that's why I'm here today. Grady couldn't make it. Jan couldn't make it. But Tree made it. And I was able to shake that man's hand. And he turned to me last night when we had a moment. He said, you owe me nothing. I said, no, sir. I owe you respect and the love of my family. Because you made it where I could come home. My family are all graduated and going to college. And my kids knew everything. My kids can tell you what an M48A3 looks like, the parts of the A48A3. I have a son that will tell you that vehicle has a 12-cylinder Continental with a 350 Allison cross-drive transmission, how many road wheels she has, and what she weighs. And I said, that's what you gave me, Tree. So this is now my story. And I'm hoping that it'll reach, because back when I was the first one designated with PTSD in Southern California, I started the first groups with my psychiatrist and all this because I knew the only way I could reach these men is we had to be the ones that were there to talk to them. And once you can get them to open up and realize they're not guilty, they did an honorable job, and they are forever, should be forever looked at as the heroes of this nation. And that, I feel, is my job now, to say our dead were taken by honest and purity, and you can walk with your head up knowing you didn't fail the fallen. The fallen were taken because they needed to protect who came home.
Beautiful words.
Thank you.
Do you have any insight into who the man is with the blue eyes?
I called him Death, or the angel of death. But now when I go home and Tree almost fell out of his chair, I'm going to be licensed and ordained as a pastor through my church. And everybody that has seen the picture, the first thing they say is, "My God, did you ever see Touched by an Angel?" And it's an old TV show. And they said, "My God, that angel of death looks just like the one you have on you." But now everybody is telling me that they're pretty sure it was Christ himself. And I believe it. I had a preacher from Texas that I never knew that night. That's where we got hit. And another Vietnam vet, which was a sniper with the Marine Corps, which is my pastor's brother. I come to find out later on through the hat and through the association and being on the internet, Mikey Marquez, he came up and said he was a sniper coming out of Contien when it was overrun. But this Zeke Gonzalez from Arizona, he's a pastor. He was an airborne ranger that they had airborned in at Rockpile, and at 4:30 in the morning, when I was being medevaced out on the helicopter, they were coming up on the ridge to support us. So all these people I've met in the last years. But the highlight of my life is my grandsons bought me a new truck because I laid in the hospital for 11 months not walking to fix something that happened in Vietnam. And I took it to the car wash for the first time, and I didn't wear the hat, and I had my arms like this. And this man come out of nowhere, and our eyes locked. And he looked at me, and he said, "You were a tanker." I looked at him, because I had my arms crossed. He couldn't see the Vietnam stuff. And I said, "Yeah." He pulled out like an old police binder, leather notebook. He says, "Well, hang on, young man." He flipped it open, and he says, "You know what? For the life of me, I never got your name." And I looked at him, I said, "Name?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "What was your rank?" I said, "I just got promoted to lance corporal, and I was going to get another position on the tank." He said, "That's another thing." He says, "I never got the number of that tank." I said, "Well, I was only on 2, Alpha 2-3 or Alpha 2-4. He said, "Well, you remember doing ammo runs and being the convoy protector for ammo going to Contien?" I said, "Oh my God." I said, "We did a lot of those." He says, "Young man," and that's when we both cried. He said, "You pulled up in between the artillery pits, you parked your tank." He said, "When the 18-wheeler, the 6x came in to unload the ammo, you got off your tank and helped unload 105 ammo into my pit." And he turns the notebook towards me. And he said, "I've been waiting 50 years to say thank you for unloading ammo into my pit. And we live in the same town." So something's happening here ever since I put this on and ever since I found my crew. And I'm going to honor it. And I'm going to honor John. I'm going to honor everybody that's in this organization. And I'll look in that camera. Thank you. Thank you, everybody that supported me to get me home so that I can stand here now and say, well done.
I don't even know if we can do any more. I think that's a perfect ending to this. Thank you so much for taking the time today, David. It's an honor and a pleasure to not only hear your stories, but to interview you. And thank you so much for your service.
Well, I thank you. Thank you.